competitive Pokemon tournament of the modern era. I was making my official competitive debut in the Orlando Regionals, a tournament with the official doubles format VGC. I had never played VGC before and this was completely new to me, but here I would be one of around 800 people participating in the VGC tournament. I was here because I wanted to qualify for Japan. If you get enough points throughout the season, 300 to be exact, you qualify to participate in the World Finals held in Japan. Think of Japan as Victory Road and the 300 championship points you need as the 8 gym badges. You have to travel across the country or even the globe collecting points trying to hit that 300 mark. This season, I'm gonna try and hit as many events as I possibly can. This is my story of my road to Japan. The Orlando Regionals starts with me arriving in Orlando. I reach around Friday evening. The event is a 2-day event with the first part of the event happening on Saturday and the top cut happening on Sunday. If you're among the top 32 players from the 10 rounds on Saturday, you qualify to play on Sunday and fight in knockout rounds. The more you win, the more points you get, with the winner of the entire regional getting a whopping 200 points. It's a good idea to show up a day early, and most people arrive on Friday to get a good night's rest before the big day. I was sharing an Airbnb with a bunch of other people I knew from Discord and I checked out the venue. It's kind of funny, most of the people I'm meeting are Discord friends that I'm seeing in real life for the first time. Nothing really happens on Friday though. I mainly just go to the venue and talk to people there. Most people don't know who I am because I don't exactly have a name tag on and I've never showed my face in a video before. But some people can catch on based on my voice, and on day 0 I had exactly one person ask me for a photograph, which admittedly did feel kind of cool. I still had to finalize my team sheet. In a VGC tournament, you can't change your team in between battles and you have to submit the team you're using to the organizers before the tournament starts. This is notably different from Smogon, where you can change your team each round. I basically had settled on a team, but I was still flip-flopping on some minor details and I hadn't submitted the team sheet yet. I was going to use a team built around the Dondozo plus Tatsugiri core. It's my favorite VGC idea. It was one of the top cores in Series 1, the format for January, with the Commander combo. Dondozo gets supercharged by Tatsugiri, but in exchange cannot switch out and Tatsugiri cannot attack anymore. Most times, however, that's completely worth it, and I've loved Dondozo ever since Series 1. But this isn't Series 1. It's Series 2, and there are Paradox Pokemon in this edition, unlike in Series 1. These Paradox Pokemon raise the overall power level, and some do have a good matchup versus Dondozo. For example, Iron Bundle is a top Series 2 Pokemon and outspeeds Dondozo and has a super effective Freeze Dry. Dondozo can Terra Steel to beat Iron Bundle, but it does mean you have to commit your Terra, and it also makes Dondozo weaker to other Pokemon. Dondozo definitely has it rougher than Series 1, but in my evaluation it was still a great Pokemon and I wanted to bring it. Then I added the core of Annihilape and Maushold, another popular Series 1 idea. I liked how it could punish bulkier, slower teams, with Maushold using Beat Up on Annihilape and then Annihilape smashing something with Rage Fist. Amoonguss plus Intimidate Arcanine is a popular way to beat Dondozo, and Mouseape defeats that. Of course, some Paradox Pokemon are annoying for the core. One annoying Pokemon is Terra Flying Acrobatics Roaring Moon. On its own, it's actually not that bad. Annihilape can Terra out of its flying type weakness, but what makes it annoying is that it's often paired with other powerful Pokemon like Iron Bundle and Great Tusk. Terra Fire is probably Annihilape's best Terra type, but if I change into a Fire type, all of a sudden I'm weak to Water and Ground. It's an uncomfortable situation, so in my last 2 slots I went with Flutter Mane and Volcarona. Basically, in the last 2 team slots, I wanted something that could match up well versus Indeedee Armarouge Trick Room, one of the better strategies in Series 2 so far, and match up well versus high-speed strategies like Tailwind Roaring Moon or Tailwind Talonflame and powerful attackers. That's where Focus Sash, Struggle Bug, Tailwind Volcarona comes in. Struggle Bug helps me versus Psychic Spam, and Tailwind helps me versus other Tailwind teams. I'm also running an offensive EV spread on Volcarona. Typically, you see a lot of bulk on support variants of Volcarona, so fast Volcarona could be a great way to surprise an opponent and get a knockout. I didn't mention this yet, but in Generation 9, tournaments are open team sheet, which means your opponent can see everything you have except your EV spread. Therefore, a good way to create surprise factor is with your EV spread. For example, the winner of the San Diego Regional a month earlier used an unexpectedly bulky Tauros water. If you can find some way to fool your opponent, you'll always have an advantage. Overall, my team still had some flaws, but I was overall pretty happy with it. You can't cover everything, and there will be matchups where you have to fight an uphill battle, but I trust Dondozo and that was that. With the help of my friends, I finalized my team sheet, submitted it, and went to sleep ready for Saturday. Reporting time for day 1 was around 7:30 AM, although the first round didn't start till quite a bit later. My first round was versus Tom Hull. From what I understood before the game, he's actually a veteran but hadn't played in a year or 2 or 3. I was hoping he would be washed up. Spoiler, he wasn't. Also, you aren't allowed to record footage of your matches, so everything I'm showing you is me recreating what happened after the fact, and I didn't recreate critical hits or exact numbers, and I don't remember every detail, so this isn't an exact representation of what happened, and I might have gotten some things wrong, but the ideas are correct. I was using a Dondozo team, and his answer to Dondozo was Spore Amoonguss. I'm not actually terrible versus Amoonguss even though it has a type advantage. I have Substitute to block Spore, and I also have Terra Steel to block Clear Smog. However, he also had Trick Room on Fluttermane. His attack plan was to use Fluttermane and Amoonguss to maneuver Spore onto me. If Trick Room is up while Amoonguss is out, Amoonguss can outspeed me and Spore me before I can use Substitute. In game 1, I made an aggressive Substitute play as I predicted a switch into Amoonguss with Trick Room up. It's a very careful game to try and outplay the Amoonguss, and fortunately I was able to get it done. In game 2, he adapted and he was able to get Spores off on Dondozo with Trick Room up. The problem, however, is that Sleep Trick Room is inherently not the most reliable way to beat Dondozo. His main way to attack Terra Steel Dondozo was Iron Hands, who does have a type advantage. But Dondozo is so tanky that it takes a few turns to actually do it. The unreliability though is that Sleep can last only 1 turn. That means if he spores me and I don't attack that turn, I can just wake up on the next turn. Add in the limited time of Trick Room and the whole thing is a powder keg. His team was very contingent on Spore to beat Dondozo, but in game 2 I got lucky with 1 turn sleeps and I was able to snatch game 2 to win the round. I definitely got lucky that game, but also it was playing with fire to rely on sleep to beat Dondozo. It was also a blessing in disguise to fight a tough opponent in round 1 because of a thing called resistance. The top 32 players make it to day 2, and that typically means you need to go 8-2. But what happens if 35 people go 8-2? How do you tiebreak them? You tiebreak them based on their opponent's winning percentage. The person who had the tougher schedule is presumably the better player. It's not a perfect system, but it's widely used and is generally a good idea. Winning versus a good player is more difficult, but the reward is greater for your resistance stat. In round 2, I played Gabriel who was using a team with Magneton. I'll be honest, I'd never seen a Magneton in VGC before, and probably for good reason. He had a very slow team with Trick Room ideas without any form of disruption like Fake Out, and he also had no ways to beat Ghost-type Pokemon. That meant my Mousehold plus Annihilate could dominate the matchup. He had no way to stop me from beating up Annihilate, and then Annihilate could just one-hit KO everything on his team with Rage Fist. Mousehold Annihilate was a literally unstoppable strategy, and I was able to win round 2 pretty quickly. There was a lot of free time before round 3, so I checked out the retro gaming station they had set up. It's a free-to-play area at the venue where you could play some of the older Pokemon games. It was pretty cool for me because I'd never actually played any of the GameCube games before. I also met Wolfie VGC sitting at his board when I saw him on the way to my board for round 3, but I didn't want to be the weird fan who annoys people before their match, so I just said hi and introduced myself as Freezeye, and that's about it. For round 3, I played Christopher Canway. He was a fan of the channel, which was pretty cool, and the games turned out to be really close. We fought back and forth, and he had powerful threats like Life Orb, King Gambit, and Roaring Moon and Iron Bundle. It went to a game 3 where he was able to knock out my Dondozo and created a 2v2 endgame. I had Scarf, Tatsugiri, and Annihilate, and he had Roaring Moon and Iron Bundle. However, his Roaring Moon didn't have Acrobatics or Terra Flying, and that's a big deal for my fighting type Annihilate. I used Tatsugiri's Icy Wind to slow down both Roaring Moon and Iron Bundle. Then, I Drain Punched Iron Bundle, but it lived the hit. Even though it was super effective, Iron Bundle does have a high enough defense stat that even Icy Wind plus Drain Punch doesn't knock it out. In return, Iron Bundle used a Terra Ice Freeze Dry to knock out my Tatsugiri. Now, I was in a tough spot. My Annihilate had to go 1v2 versus the 2 Paradox Pokemon. However, I did have the speed advantage because of Tatsugiri. I Drain Punched the Roaring Moon to knock it out, and then with all the health I gained, I was able to live the Iron Bundle's Terra Ice Freeze Dry with just a little bit of HP left. Then after that, Annihilate was able to outspeed and knock out Iron Bundle, and I came out alive in the closest series I would end up having all tournament. In round 4, however, I had my first real challenge, Chuppa Cross. He's well known as an elite VGC player, and he made the finals of San Diego, the most recent tournament before this one. He was also Dondozo plus Tatsugiri too. One of the weaknesses of my team is in fact Dondozo. There are different approaches to building Dondozo. Dozo-Giri can be one of the options, or it can be the star of the show. I evaluated Dozo as being one of the best options for the tournament, and my team was very Dozo-centric. The pieces around it were there to build for the Dozo win, either cleaning up after Dozo or clearing the way for it. I had literally a 100% Dozo-Giri pick rate for the entire tournament. I'm going to bring Dozo-Giri every single game and you can't stop me was basically my playstyle. However, Dondozo stalemates versus other Dondozo. Dozo versus Dozo converges to a timer win. There's a 20-minute overall timer, and at that timer, whoever has more Pokemon alive wins, and after that it's whoever has more relative HP left. If played normally, it is literally impossible for a Dondozo to faint before the timer runs out. In a Dondozo mirror, your goal is often to gain the lead and then stalemate the position. That way you win the game. The rest of my team does not have a great way to beat Dondozo, so from my point of view, in most situations I have to be playing for the stalemate. I was aware of this going in, that my only way to beat Dozo was to try and gain a lead and lock the position. My team wasn't suited to try and gain the lead because it relies on Dozo to get those leads. However, I accepted that as a weakness of the team going in. Realistically, I was going to fight maybe 1 or 2 Dondozos all tournament. It wasn't ideal, but I could try and outplay to get a KO with my other Pokemon. It was one of the team's weaknesses, but it wasn't an unplayable weakness, and I was fine with that. In game 1, he brought Goldengo Talonflame with obviously Dozo-Giri in the back, and I was desperate to get a KO, and I lead Dondozo and knocked out Talonflame while he burnt me with Will-O-Wisp. However, my burnt Dozo loses to his Dozo, and I eventually lose my Dondozo before timer runs out. It's back to 3v3, however, I was actually able to overpower his Dondozo with Draco Meteor Tatsugiri, Life Orb Moonblast Fluttermane, and Rage Powder Volcarona protecting Fluttermane for at least a little bit. I was able to convert those 3 Pokemon to a Game 1 win even though I lost Dondozo. Game 2 degenerated into a Dondozo-Dondozo fight where I got 2 critical hits while he got 1. This was likely to converge into a timer win for me, so he forfeited early and I was able to win Game 2 to go 4-0 overall. At this point I was pretty happy. I had beaten someone really good and I was always halfway on my way to 8-2. On top of that, because I was winning early, my resistance was also likely to be good. A person who goes 4-0 into 4-1 usually plays better players and is likely to have a higher resistance than someone who went 0-1 to 4-1. Also at this point I got kind of tired of recording stuff, so I was trying to focus more on my games and I don't have a lot of footage for the next few rounds at least. In round 5 I played Rex Reyes and he was using a screen teams with Grimmsnarl and stuff like Sylveon, Iron Bundle, and Iron Hands. It was a bit of a slower team though, and I was able to power through with Mouseape lead and Dozo-Giri in the back. Then at 5-0 I played Giovanni Costa, who is well known as a top VGC player. You might remember him from the Dragonite comeback video where he used Eevee. This time he was using Talonflame and his signature Dragonite, which was choice banded with extreme speed. He also had Meowscarada, which I had to be careful about because it has Flower Trick, which can critical hit my Dondozo. I can Terra Steel, but it's not that easy because then Dondozo becomes vulnerable to the mighty Great Tusk. There are complications and you have to be able to maneuver correctly. What I identified though is that his team is relatively reliant on Tailwind for speed. I made the strategic decision that I was okay with trading a burn on Dondozo for removing Talonflame. The key to this game was going to be denying his speed. I had Fluttermane to stop banded Terra Normal Extreme Speed from Dragonite, and Tatsugiri is actually the Pokemon who becomes important as it outspeeds all of his Pokemon and does great damage with moves like Muddy Water and Draco Meteor. My plan is to use Dondozo as the Wrecking Ball to knock out Talonflame and then flail around getting as much damage as it can before fainting. Then I clean up with Tatsugiri, Volcarona, and Fluttermane spamming strong attacks while also being faster. I glossed over a lot of the details here, but there are more complications. It isn't just automatically winning with Tatsugiri and friends. For example, Terra Normal Extreme Speed can still knock out my other Pokemon. It just doesn't do well versus Fluttermane. Also, you have to make sure you time your health so that when Dondozo inevitably faints, you don't also lose Tatsugiri in the same turn, which can happen. To clarify, if the first attack of the turn knocks out Dondozo, then the second attack targets Tatsugiri, which doesn't have very good defense. It took 3 games, but the Dozo Talonflame trade strategy worked well overall, and I moved on to 6-0. In round 7, I fought Yichun Wu, who was also using a Talonflame based strategy. I went with the same trade approach and it worked well. Again, there are complications with making sure Tatsugiri doesn't die during the life after Dondozo. For example, Iron Bundle could knock out Dozo with Freeze Dry, and then Great Tusk, Earthquake, or Headlong Rush could knock out Tatsugiri. At the same time, you have to be careful using Terra Steel too early versus Iron Bundle, because then Great Tusk might knock you out. You really have to manage your HP with stuff like Protect and Wave Crash Recoil to do your best to avoid losing 2 Pokemon in one turn. I was able to win 2-0 mixing it up with Dozogiri Volcarona Fluttermane, and then Dozogiri Annihilate Fluttermane because I expected Tyranitar in game 2, which he did actually bring. That brought me to 7-0, and there were only 6 undefeated players left. At 7-0, the feeling was great and I had basically guaranteed getting points out of the event. Only top 32 makes day 2, but top 128 still gets some points out of it. I had to win 1 out of my last 3 series to qualify for day 2, but I genuinely felt confident that I could win the entire event. The news was spreading that a new guy is 7-0, apparently some sort of YouTuber, and I started getting a lot of Twitter followers, which was pretty funny. It felt like I was playing my player on 2K. Actually, before my 8th round, I happened to reach the board after my opponent did, and my opponent asked me what my in-game name was, which was slightly unusual because it doesn't matter too much. But apparently people were asking him if he was Freeze-Eye, and he had no idea what that was about. In any case, my round 8 game was versus Diego Gutierrez, who was using the very cool Terra Normal Giga Impact Dragonite. He also had Brute, Bonnet, and Rotom Wash, who would be annoying versus Dondozo. However, his team was also on the slower side. My Annihilate had a lot of speed EVs and could do really well versus his team. His form of speed control was Icy Wind Fluttermane, but that just doubles my Annihilate's attack because of Defiant. My plan was always going to be Mouse Ape with Dozogiri in the back. I don't remember which game it was, but one game I won cleanly, but the other was Brute Bonnet Fluttermane versus my Annihilate Mousefold. He Moonblasted my Terra Fire Annihilate and got a special attack drop which doubled my attack. Then my beat up boosted Rage Fist critical hit the Brute Bonnet and knocked it out despite being not very effective. Moonblast dropped into critical hit with Brutal and it sucked the life out of the game. There was nothing he could do and it turned a potentially exciting game into an easy one, and that moved me to 8-0. Overall, I had some moments of bad luck that I haven't mentioned in the video, but I was definitely net lucky. Honestly, simply not being unlucky over the course of a day is itself lucky, but I'm not complaining though, and I think I had been playing well anyway. Also, I got randomly hack-checked. It's funnier to say I got hack-checked immediately after going 8-0, but it's pretty normal procedure and they randomly hack-check people around the top boards. I'd say most people get checked at least one time. In one of the rounds, somebody was using a different Iron Hands than the one they reported and they received a game loss for the next round and were not allowed to use their Iron Hands anymore. They're basically making sure that you're using the Pokemon that you say you're using and not changing things like EV spreads. I don't know exactly what they do, but they take your Switch and I think they manually check your Pokemon to see if it matches what you submitted. But finally I had my 8 wins and basically guaranteed making it to day 2. There were 3 undefeated players left and I ended up getting randomly paired with Toler Webb, the 2012 senior champion. But the vibes are not very competitive. Once you qualify, there's nothing to play for. Getting a better seed doesn't mean anything. Both an 8-2 player and a 10-0 player have equal footing in the knockout stages. I got lucky and won round 9 to go 9-0, but I wouldn't call them very serious games in the first place. I also brought my camera out again to record stuff. Then in round 10 I fought Emilio Forbes, the other 9-0 remaining. He actually went 10-0 in San Diego and 10-0 in his last regional before that back in Generation 8. I lost pretty handily and I ended day 1 at 9-1. I had the strongest strength of opponents and that made me the number 2 seed going into day 2, where I would fight Chuppa again, the 31 seed. The way it works is that you can't change your team in between day 1 and day 2, but everyone has access to everyone's team sheet. So it's about spending the night preparing for your future opponents. Whether you want to look ahead to all your potential opponents or just focus on the one immediately in front of you is completely up to you. 10 rounds of best of 3 Pokemon takes a long time, and day 1 ended at around 11:30 PM, with reporting to day 2 starting around 7:30 AM. You had only that window of time to prepare for your next opponent. I prepared what I could and slept until day 2. When we reported for day 2, I was informed that my match would be on stream. They basically call you over and have you tell them the information like your team, your achievements, etc. From what I understand, the casters are the one who pick the matchups that go on stream. You're not allowed to wear anything branded that's not Pokemon. You also have to wear white noise headphones so you can't hear anything external. The white noise is obviously loud and it's a little annoying, but it's something you can get used to. There's also a microphone that gets past the white noise so that you can communicate with your opponent and the judges. Game 1 started and he brought a lead combination that I didn't expect at all. Tatsugiri and Pawmot. Ordinarily, Tatsugiri is not a Pokemon you lead with. It's incredibly fragile and also incredibly important because of Dondozo. Losing Tatsugiri is like losing Tatsugiri and Dondozo. Also, if you switch in Dondozo while Tatsugiri is on the field, neither Dozo nor Giri makes a move that turn, which can make you vulnerable. I personally have almost never led Tatsugiri, but I imagine he might have done it more often because he has Revival Blessing support. Either way, I didn't expect it and it was a problem. Draco Meteor and Terra Electric Pawmot threatened one-hit KOs on my Pokemon. I was expecting something like Talonflame Brute Bonnet and I went with Annihilate Maushold. Annihilate Maushold can punish slower teams but doesn't do great versus faster ones. I can't even switch into anything because my back row of Dondozo and Tatsugiri would lose to Terra Electric Double Shock spam, and Dozo's Unaware ignores the special attack drops from Giri's Draco Meteor. I end up losing a Pokemon because I can't keep up with the pressure. He turtles up into Dozo Giri as I try and take a KO with my own Dozo Giri. We both are locked into the Dozo mirror and can't switch out. Because of the timer rules, I'm guaranteed to lose the game here because he's knocked out one of my Pokemon and has a Pokemon advantage. He even tells me on the mic that it is over, but I actually keep playing. And it's good etiquette to forfeit here to save everybody's time, but the reason I kept playing because I was trying to buy time to find a strategy for game 2. He already caught me off guard for game 1, and I wanted to try and find a strategy that can fight lead Tatsugiri options. The problem is that Icy Wind slows down my fast Pokemon and removes Focus Sash so that Double Shock Pawmot can knock them out. My usual answer to Icy Wind spam, most commonly done by Iron Bundle, is Dondozo, but that doesn't work here because of Pawmot. In isolation, Pawmot is not terribly bad for me. Dondozo's defense is high enough that I can try and take on Pawmot. The problem here is that I need Dondozo for Dondozo, and if I take too much damage with it, I just lose the 1v1 versus his Dondozo. I decided to go with the lead option of Volcarona and Fluttermane, something I had briefly prepared earlier. My idea here was that I could take the Icy Wind from Tatsugiri and redirect Pawmot's Double Shock off of Fluttermane. I would basically trade Volcarona to knock out Giri and bring Pawmot down to Sash. That happens, but it runs into the problem of Talonflame. Talonflame's Tailwind solves any problem I can try and pose. In hindsight, Dozo was probably better than Giri here, but I wasn't sure what he had and I felt like I wanted a fast Pokemon on the field. But going with Tatsugiri was the final mistake here and I couldn't handle Talonflame. And with that, he finished me off and I lost 0-2 and my tournament was over. Just as Tatsugiri and Dondozo carried me throughout the tournament, it was also what finished me off. And what was I doing? I thought I was preparing, but I got out-prepped and outplayed 2 games in a row. He took the night to come up with a novel idea to attack my team, and I was basically just doing nothing. There's definitely some room for introspection, and I still have a lot of room to improve. I have the general ideas and strategies down, but I lack that precision, and that really showed up. When you're playing elite competition, the margin of error becomes smaller and smaller, and mistakes that normally don't get punished do get punished. Chuppa would go on to lose in the semifinals to Ashton Cox, another Dondozo player, and Ashton Cox would go on to lose to Wolf Glick in the finals. As for me, I did get 60 championship points, so it's not all that bad. Call that my first gym badge, and my road to Japan continues. Thanks for watching.